The Papah Trail. Let's go, 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 go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Niggas come around for that love of money. Some stay around for that. I gotta shake it 12 at night to 5 in the morning. They don't give a fuck, dog. If it's for that money, niggas gon' bark and they bite like a motherfucking dog. Gotta party like a motherfucking dog for that cat. I am gon' roof and I'm barking at that cat, and I am gon' take the roof off when I'm riding that ride. Rip, leaning to the left, but I'm steady on the only right. I'm swerving with a purpose, with a purpose. A nigga been sipping on that purple. A nigga been cheaping on that purple. Cause I'm getting money, I'm getting money. Cause I'm getting money. And I'm laughing all the way to the motherfucking bank. And I'm telling her, tell me later. And she thinking what I'm thinking. Damn me getting money. I walk about the bank and I stuck up in the wheel to my next big destination. Somewhere where I'm gonna be faded, sipping on the
on charges of conspiracy, committing wire fraud, and money laundering. After the FTX scam was uncovered, the scandal brought SBF a loss of billions of dollars, leaving it with nothing but the money it had in its pockets. Or at least, that's what the biggest scammer in history has tried to make us believe, as he somehow managed to post a $250 million bail. But where did he get almost $300 million if he lost all his money? Who are his mysterious benefactors? More importantly, are there people who want to shut him up forever? This is the story of the possible link between FTX and Epstein. Before he was accused of committing one of the biggest scams in history, Bankman-Fried was well off financially. As the founder of the world's second largest cryptocurrency exchange, the man behind FTX possessed a fortune of nearly $26 billion. However, Sam aspired to more than just amass great wealth. He also wanted to become a central player in US politics. To that end, he became the second largest donor to the Democratic Party and one of the men responsible for indirectly bringing Joe Biden to power. You might think Sam did this because he was a nice man and pure of heart, but I'm sure you can imagine that wasn't the case. First of all, he didn't fund the Democratic Party because he was a believer in the party's ideology. Instead, he wanted to influence American politics and saw the Democratic Party as the means that would lead him to find himself even above his competitors, including Binance. While Binance founder Changpeng Zhao believes that cryptocurrency markets should be decentralized, Bankman-Fried favors regulating cryptocurrencies. The curious thing about SBF's stance is that cryptocurrencies were created to be decentralized, which means that no government or bank should be able to regulate them directly. So what Bankman-Fried was looking for by supporting these regulatory measures was to betray the very people who helped him build his wealth. And if he could become the main ally of those responsible for regulating the market, he would become much more powerful. Of course, Sam only wanted to become an ally of the country's leaders to cover up his dirty laundry. In fact, it's believed that most of the funds used to finance the Democratic political campaign came from money that Alameda Research, Bankman-Fried's second company, stole from its clients. For further evidence, public records of Bankman-Fried's money show that the businessman supported multiple Democratic committees and candidates. Bankman-Fried's largest donations were $27 million to his own super PAC, which supported Democratic candidates, and $6 million to a PAC that helped elect Democrats to the US House of Representatives. He also gave a maximum of $5,800 to support dozens of party candidates. And President Joe Biden's 2020 presidential bid benefited from more than $5 million in donations. For her part, former FTX executive Nishad Singh earmarked $2.3 million to support a Democratic-leaning super PAC called Women Vote, and another $2 million to a PAC that supported the Biden campaign, and another $1 million to the Bankman-Fried super PAC. As you can see, the FTX leadership had a gigantic stake in the Democratic Party's victory. Yet, despite all this evidence, members of the White House deny any ties to the businessman. After all, it's not good for a nation to have its leaders associated with a generous scammer with 8 criminal charges or wire fraud conspiracy and money laundering. But even if the White House pretends to have no relationship with the FTX founder, the nervous posturing of government spokespeople seems to say the exact opposite. We only have to look at the facts. When a company finances a party's political campaign, it does so in the hope that its favor will soon be returned. Therefore, it would be naive to believe that Sam gave away all these millions in exchange for nothing. While I don't believe that the Democratic Party directly had anything to do with the FTX scam, it certainly enjoyed his dirty money and leveraged it to get into power. Now that things have gotten complicated for Bankman-Fried, it's almost as if the party members have lost track of who was the kindly businessman who gave them millions of dollars. And they haven't been willing to return the campaign money to the victims either. This is one of the biggest secrets behind the FTX fraud. But there is much more, because SBF was much more cunning and clever than they would have us to believe. So far, Sam Bankman-Fried has tried to play the role of innocent and negligent. He wants people to believe that his clients lost their money because of his incompetence. Even if all evidence pointed to FTX stealing his clients' deposits and using the funds to buy luxury real estate, help politicians, and finance Alameda Research. However, this is nothing more than a perverse scheme to escape a sentence of up to 115 years in prison. If Bankman-Fried were to prove to the world that he's an idiot, he could face less severe punishment than if he were proven to be a greedy and calculating man. So, without going any further, we have some belief. Bankman-Fried's ties to the Republican Party. One of the main differences between Bankman-Fried and the average billionaire is that he is not a lover of excess and luxury. Unlike Jeffrey Epstein, who we'll discuss in a few minutes, Bankman-Fried was never interested in yachts or sports cars, except for living in a mansion with his closest friends. Or at least, that's what he tried to show us. Bankman-Fried will be remembered more for his cringe videos on TikTok than for being seen driving an expensive car like Andrew Tate. But it's precisely the people who claim to be less greedy who have a greater love of money and power than others. The FTX founder may well have built a reputation as a generous philanthropist, giving away large sums of money to any cause that might help boost his reputation. This was FTX's goal from the beginning, to become a company in which investors could place their trust. That is why millions of people decided to invest their savings in the platform, with the false belief that Sam was not interested in money. But what kind of entrepreneur is not interested in having millions in his bank account? And why would Sam have gone to such great lengths to fund an entire political party when he could have retired in his 30s without ever working again in his entire life? The answer is that Sam was more interested in money than he would publicly admit. It helped him feel powerful and increased his status. As Bankman-Fried impressed the masses with his speeches and collected billions of dollars in his bank accounts, his immeasurable ego kept growing. Eventually, he ended up creating a paradise in the Bahamas, where he took refuge before being extradited to the United States. But why are we so sure that Bankman-Fried's actions were intended and not accidental? Well, this is one of the most interesting things about Bankman-Fried's personality. If we had been convinced by his generous donations to the Democratic Party and various charities, we might believe that he was a philanthropist who wanted to help others, or that he truly believed in the party he supported. However, when no one was looking, SBF was unfaithful to the Democratic Party with the Republican Party. He never cared who got elected, as long as it helped him achieve his plans. This is not the thinking of a philanthropist who wants the best for his country, but a political opportunist who wants to acquire more power for himself and his associates. With FTX behind American politics, Bankman-Fried could have gotten away with it without anyone ever finding out the truth. But instead, we were only months away from Sam consolidating his power and hiding how he betrayed his clients. And what better way for FTX leaders to prove that their company was transparent than by supporting a campaign to regulate the crypto market? This will be the perfect cover for FTX's crimes, rendering it invisible to the eyes of investigators. It would be like suspecting the largest animal shelter in the world is selling dog meat. Therefore, I believe that what Bankman-Fried was trying to do by supporting a more regulated crypto market was to hide his own misdeeds. Nevertheless, it's because of these strange ties to politics that Bankman-Fried's life is reminiscent to another of the biggest donors in the history of the Democratic Party, named after Jeffrey Epstein, a billionaire and sex offender who authorities say ended up committing suicide in his jail cell. The same cell in which Bankman-Fried could end up in prison if justice finds him guilty. So the question is, will this be another coincidence or a harbinger of the unfortunate accident that awaits the founder of FTX to protect America's most powerful? And who exactly is Jeffrey Epstein, and how does his story tie into Bankman-Fried's? The strange connection between Bankman-Fried and Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was an American financial tycoon, child molester, and sexual predator convicted of running an elite child trafficking ring. But before he became known as a degenerate, he had a prosperous career as a financial officer at the investment bank Bear Stearns until he founded his own firm, J. Epstein & Co. Naturally, his scandals made him one of the most controversial and reviled figures in US history. But before being accused of sex crimes in 2008, the businessman enjoyed a great political and social influence that distanced him from other millionaires, just like our friend SBF. In 2005, Palm Beach police began investigating Epstein after a father reported him for molesting his 14-year-old daughter. From there, Epstein's life went from bad to worse until the sexual predator had no choice but to plead guilty. He was later charged by a Florida state court with luring minors into prostitution. On July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested on federal charges of trafficking minors in Florida and New York. By August 10, 2019, he was dead. You may wonder how a child molester who died in 2019 finds himself linked to the biggest crypto scandal of 2022. Well, while Sam and Epstein couldn't be any more different, they had the same kind of connections. They were friends of power and politics and big donors to the Democratic Party, which means they were backed by even more powerful people than we can imagine. Indeed, that Epstein managed to get away with it for so long is no mere coincidence, as many of his clients were members of the elite who rule the world. But when justice managed to get its hands on him, many of these powerful clients were afraid to go down with the tycoon. As a result, some suspect that Epstein was actually murdered to protect these influential men and women involved in one of the largest child sex trafficking rings in the world. And there's evidence to prove that Epstein did not take his own life. One of the main curiosities about Epstein's death is that before he was found hanged in his cell, he was found beaten and unconscious in his cell. Some believed in a failed suicide attempt, given that he had marks on his neck. But this is where things get more intriguing. When they performed an autopsy on Epstein's body on August the 11th, the New York City Coroner's Office announced that more information was needed before determining his cause of death. So, if Epstein really committed suicide, why was it not reflected in the autopsy? There were other factors that also drew attention to the businessman's death, including repeated comments he made to prison psychologists, claiming that he was mentally sound and had no intention of committing suicide. He also repeatedly told prison officials that he would never commit suicide because he was Jewish, and that was against his religion. And as if all the evidence was not enough, Bureau of Prisons documents show a statement in which Epstein said he would never commit suicide because he was too cowardly to do so. But there's more. After his apparent suicide attempt in July, the night of his death. So how many more coincidences can surround the death of a person? What's stranger about this whole affair is that we have important similarities between Jeffrey Epstein and Sam Bankman-Fried that could prove that the two men had much more in common than we thought. For example, both businessmen were big donors to the Democratic Party, meaning that some of Epstein's clients could have been party members, and they may even have been the ones Bankman-Fried supported financially. But that's not the scariest part of this story. While SBF headed to the same cell as Epstein, no one can assure us that he will not suffer a similar fate. It's possible that having been associated with members of the Democratic and Republican parties, Bankman-Fried uncovered far more secrets than necessary. Secrets that politicians don't want us to find out. What if FTX was actually a company set up to launder money for important members of politics? Or if Bankman-Fried was pressured to launder money for some party members? In that case, it may not be too long before Sam ends up slipping and breaking his neck in jail. Even before Sam decided to finance the Democratic Party, his family was already quite involved in American politics. While Bankman-Fried's mother was a Stanford professor and co-founder of a political fundraising campaign, his brother, Gabe, was the founder and director of Guarding Against Pandemics and a legislative correspondent for the US House of Representatives. At the same time, his aunt, Linda Fried, was a member of the World Economic Forum. Even FTX's head of business, Amy Wu, formerly worked for the Clinton Foundation. In other words, his family and work connections meant that he associated with more influential and powerful people than any businessman could have dreamed of. Some of them belonged to the bosom of his own family, and others were strategic allies of his company. But of course, when the FTX bombshell went off, everyone let go of Bankman-Fried's hand, just as the pedophiles who funded Jeffrey Epstein's child sex trafficking ring claimed never to have met him. If all of this speculation is true, we could be in for a race against time before some former Bankman-Fried ally decides to take action against him. But since Sam doesn't seem to have a kind of personality that would make him a threat, he might be lucky not to share Epstein's fate, unless he decides to talk. According to some recent interviews, we can see the FTX founder shaking. Some say he's afraid of his sentence. Others say that the tremors may be because there is someone else behind him, pressuring him. So even if SBF decides to open his mouth to save his skin, his former allies might take action against him or his family. And I think that's the reason these people want to send him to the same cell where Jeffrey Epstein took his life, to remind him that they can also murder him. Or maybe we're just a bunch of conspiracy nuts who watch too many fictional movies. However, if we look at all the clues closely, we might find some strange evidence that could help us shed some light on this murky business. First, we know that Jeffrey Epstein and SBF were two billionaires with great political influence, who made their fortunes legally and illegally. Secondly, we know that both used dirty money to finance the Democratic Party. And finally, we know that one of them ended up dead, while the other, who is still breathing, is on his way to the cell where they found Epstein's body. Not to mention that they both endangered the freedom and money of the wrong people. Those irrefutable facts prove that there is something darker behind the downfall of both businessmen. Yet, Even criminals like SBF have allies in the least expected corners. Who posted Sam Bankman-Fried's $250 million bail? In December 2022, the world gasped when the justice set SBF's bail at $250 million. That is believed to be the largest pre-trial bail amount in US legal history. While this sum may seem huge, that money used to be a tip compared to the tons of money FTX amassed annually. But how did SBF pay such an exorbitant amount after losing all of his money? The answer is, with the help of his parents and two other mysterious anonymous individuals. First, we know that Sam bought his family a nice house with the funds he stole from his clients, so it's not surprising that they were able to help him post bail. The strange thing about this whole situation is that there are two additional mysterious people who helped Sam go free, despite the risk of losing their money. After all, if SBF does not appear in court in the future when required, the four confirmers of his bail will be obligated to pay the full $250 million on his behalf. Even if we know that two of these confirmed are his parents, Joseph Bankman and Barbara Fried, we still do not yet know the identity of the others. Could these people be linked to FTX's shady dealings, or be good Samaritans willing to risk millions of dollars to help a friend in trouble? Unfortunately, these individuals' identities may never be revealed if SBF gets its way. That is why this news has given rise to all sorts of speculation, such as Sam having a frontman overseas who's acting on his behalf. Unless he's getting help from a group of individuals who don't want the FTX founder to end up behind bars. Maybe that's the smartest way to keep Bankman-Fried quiet, and why the biggest conman in history might end up getting a better ending than Jeffrey Epstein. But who do you think SBF's mysterious benefactors are? Will the businessman make it to freedom, or do you think something bad will happen to him first? We'll be reading you in the comments. See you soon.
The Papah Trail. Let's go, 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 go. Yeah, 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 yeah. For the love of money, niggas come around. For the love of money, some stay around. For the love of money, what a nigga will do for the love of the money, money. Yeah. I gotta shake it, 12 at night to 5 in the morning. They don't give a fuck, dog. If it's for that money, niggas gon' bark and they bite like a motherfucking dog. Gotta party like a motherfucking dog for that cat. I am gon' roof and I'm barking at that cat and I am when I'm riding every. I'm swerving with a purpose, A nigga been sipping on that purple. A nigga been cheaping on that purple. Cause I'm getting money, Cause I'm getting money. And I'm living all the way to the motherfucking back. I walk about the bank and I stuck up in the wheel. Headed to my next big destination. Somewhere where I'm gonna be faded. Sipping on a motherfucking Molotov. Feet in the fucking sand. Looking like a motherfucking distant fucking land myself. Wherever I land, I must be fly myself. And I ain't playing not one damn game. I'm swerving with a purpose. A nigga been sipping on that purple. A nigga been cheaping on that purple. Cause I'm getting money, Cause I'm getting money. And I'm living all the way to the motherfucking bank. And I'm telling her, tell me later. And she thinking what I'm thinking, damn it, get money. Shining like a motherfucking diamond, timeless, King Leo, elite lions, primate, sucker the motherfucking knobs like an 8. Nigga about to go motherfucking great.